In this video, you'll be watching an excerpt from our Civil 3D intro class. The topic I'll be covering is points. Okay, so in Civil 3D, we have something called COGO points. It really just stands for Civil 3D points, but COGO is coordinate geometry. So that's where that's coming from. All right. If you're in just regular AutoCAD, they're just called points, but in Civil 3D, they're called COGO points. My coworker started this PowerPoint and he likes to create these charts with the what, why, and how. It also gives a page number in the book. So if you want to look up COGO points in the book, it will be on page 40. What are they? They are Civil 3D points with various properties, including point number, point name, XYZ values, and description. Why do we need them? They signify the location of objects such as trees, posts, monuments, etc. They're used to map out survey data. How do we use them? On the Home tab of the ribbon, Create Ground Data panel, there is a Point Creation Tools button. Okay. And then here's just a note. You won't really see this until a little bit later, but raw description is the field description. It's a description that's coming from either a text file or Excel file. The full description is something that is generated from description keys. So we have a whole lesson on description keys, so you will see this later. All right, so point groups are really important, but I will first have us create points before talking about point groups. And we're going to create a brand new drawing. So I do want you to start from the template. If you have a company one, sure, go for it. If not, let's use the one I talked about this morning. So new, browse for template, and then this Civil 3D Imperial NCS. Okay, good, it's open. So let's save this in a Civil 3D intro folder. Let's call this point practice. Oh, point practice. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to create a few points manually. After that, I will show you how to import a text file that has points. So from the Home tab of the ribbon, we have all of our Civil 3D creation tools on the left side. There is the Create Ground Data panel and the Point button. If you click the point button, there is a drop down, and there are many different ways to create points. You can create points along an alignment from a surface. You can convert AutoCAD points, etc. Bunch of things here. We're going to use the first one called Point Creation Tools. Point Creation Tools should open up a toolbar. It can look like a toolbar like this, or the double arrows on the right expands it into a window. For now, we'll stick to the toolbar. Each of these buttons has a drop down. So if you click the little triangle on the right side of the button, there are, again, many, many different ways to create points. So it just depends what you're trying to do. So if you're thinking, I need to create points along a polyline, you can take a look. There is an option to do that. Okay. So for starters, let's just click this first button. Actually, just to make sure, let's click the drop down and use manual. When you pick manual, your command line is going to talk to you. It says specify a location for the new point. You can click on your screen, or you can type X, Y, right? So for our example, we're just going to click on our screen. Then it'll ask you for a description. For the first one, let's call it spot, S-P-O-T. So it's just a spot elevation. Enter. Then it'll ask you for the elevation, the Z value. You can type it in. Let's type 100. Enter. Okay. So you'll see that all it gave me was an X. It's using some default style. So we'll talk more about the default style in a little bit. Let's create a second point. Click somewhere out here. And then for the description on this one, let's use capital letters and type TREE, the word tree. Enter. Elevation, let's do 102. Enter. And notice how that one looks different. Okay, so again, we have a whole lesson on description keys, but the description key is what is controlling this point. Let's hit escape. The description key is assigning the symbol, it's assigning the label style, and it's all coming off of this description. So if I have capital letters TREE, it will generate this type of style. If I select this X and hover, maybe I don't need to select it, let me hover. If I just hover over the X, the layer is VNode, and VNode is just a default point layer. But if I hover over the tree symbol, this layer is V-node-tree. So another thing that these description keys are doing is this also assigning a separate layer for this object. Okay. So we will get into that whole lesson. Let's come back to this toolbar, click the double arrow on the right. And let's take a look at what's in this window. So the default layer is VNode, and we saw it was used on this default point here. Point creation has some settings. Default style, if you look in this window, default style is actually grayed out. So it's not using the default style on this X. See how point number, elevation, description is the label, but this one doesn't have a label. So that default is coming from somewhere else. Default name format. If you want to give your point a name, that's optional. Point identity, point number. So this is probably point number 1. This is point number 2. And then the next one I create will be point number 3. If you want it to start from 100 and count by 2s, you can change that here. So you can say 102, right? So there's a bunch of different things you can set up. What I want us to do right now is under point creation. Let's say I want to make a bunch more trees. There is an option here called prompt for description. Manual means I'm typing it in the command line. If I switch it to automatic, then I can go to default description and I can put capital letters TREE. So it is case sensitive when it comes to these description key trees. Okay, so I want prompt for description, automatic. Default is TREE, capital letters. So this will save me some time. If I'm making a bunch of trees, I don't want to type the word tree every single time. Now it will just automatically use tree. Okay. Now that that's set up, go back to the top left. We're still creating points manually. Command line says to specify a location. I'll just click somewhere. And then it wants an elevation. Let's use 103. Notice it did not ask me for the description. Make one more, click somewhere, elevation 105. And again, it automatically used the tree. Questions so far? Okay, let's close this toolbar and let's talk about changing the way this one looks. Okay, so these are looking just the way I want them. But let's say I want this to have a different symbol and a label. If I select it, right click, open regular properties, I can create an override. Just like most things, if you change the properties of that object, you're doing an override. So up at the top under information, it says the style is using a default style and the point label style is using a default label style. So I want to override the default. For my style, let's pick catch basin. And for my point label style, let's pick point number, elevation, description. Okay, so I've created a couple of overrides. I'm going to escape and zoom in. So now it's showing what I told it to show. So I don't suggest that you always override your points. I will show you where the default is coming from and how to set it up correctly. But I just wanted to point out that this can be done. I'm going to close properties. Let's delete all the points in model space. So we should have 4 of them. Delete all 4. CAD Masters offers online and classroom training for a variety of Autodesk software. For more information, go to www.cadmasters.com or give us a call at 925-939-1378. So next, I'm going to show you how to import points from a text file. If you have a text file, that can go straight into Civil 3D. If you have an Excel file, your Excel file needs to be saved as a CSV, comma, separated variable. So let me just show you real quick. So if I had an Excel file and had all the points in here, I would go to File, Save As, and then instead of saving it as XLSX, you just use this drop down and save it as my MS-DOS CSV, comma, separated variable. Once you save it as a CSV, then you could bring it into Civil 3D. Okay. So we are not going to need to use Excel today. We're going to use a text file. Let me show you what it looks like. So inside of my Civil 3D intro folder, I have a survey folder. Inside of the survey folder, I have a topo.txt file. So you're just watching. Inside of that text file, this is what it looks like. So the first column is point number. The second column is northing. Third column is easting. Fourth column is elevation. And the last column is description. So not all of my points have a description, but some of them do. Okay. So this is PNEZD. Point number, northing, easting, elevation, description, right? If you have any extra information like the survey crew, the date that it was taken, the project site name, like you need to get rid of all that. It has to be just the clean, raw data. And in this case, they are separated by commas. So ours is nice and clean. So now you can follow along. I'm still in the point practice drawing, just a blank drawing. I'm going to go to the home tab of the ribbon, the point button, point creation tools. So this is the same toolbar that we had open before, but this time we're going to use this button on the right side, import points. Okay, once you click, it opens up this next window. There's different parts of the window. So at the top, on the right side, the plus button will allow you to add a file. From your desktop, Civil 3D intro, survey, pick the topo.txt file. Click open. So up at the top, this is the path to that file. In the second part of the window, this is where we pick the formatting. So scroll all the way to the bottom. We are using PNEZD, comma, delimited. If the format that you need is not in this list, over on the right side, there's the button with the pencil. This will allow you to create your own format. But most of the time, you should be able to find it in this list. Down in the third part of the window, this is just a preview. This is not all the points, it's just some of them. This is point number, northing, easting, elevation, and description. So as long as the format is correct, we're good there. Down here, there is a checkbox, add points to a point group. So I recommend you always add your points to a point group. We currently don't have any groups, so the button on the right will allow us to create a group. I'm clicking the button and I'm going to name this, typically I give it the survey date. So this would be survey, and then today's date's fine. All right, so survey, today's date, click OK. And so there's several reasons why we want to put it into a group. One reason is to keep today's survey separate from the one you might get next week, right? If I want to know which ones are from today, which ones are from next week, I need them in separate groups, or I will definitely get confused between all those points. Another reason is just to be able to control the way these points look. So we'll get into that in a minute, but always put them into a group. Down here, doing an elevation adjustment would follow the transformation tab in this drawing settings. So if in that transformation tab we said add 5,000 feet to the elevations, checking this box will link you up with that setting. Do a coordinate transformation if possible. So this checkbox will still link up to that transformation tab in settings, but this one is in the XY plane. So for example, in San Francisco, sometimes they don't show the full X and Y coordinates. They move the decimal place a few times. And so you might say, okay, I need to change my XY coordinates by multiplying by 1,000 or something. So in this class, we do not need to change our coordinates. These are all correct. Click OK. All right, and so if you do not see points, zoom extents. So you'll see we have a bunch of just normal points with the red X, and then we have some tree points. The tree points have that tree symbol. They have a description that tells what kind of tree it is, but all the points have a point number and elevation being shown. So let's talk a little bit about what we see in Toolspace. Go to the Prospector tab of Toolspace. So on that Prospector tab, we have a points category. To the left of that, there's now a square with a dot in it. That just lets me know that points exist in this drawing file. When I click on points, the bottom half of Toolspace shows the point list. And I can click on these values and change them if I need to. So we're not going to make a change, just hit escape. But this portion of the window is kind of small. It's difficult to work in. Another option is right-clicking on the point category and going to edit points. This will give me a pop-out window that's a little bit easier to work with. So in this pop-out window, there's a scroll bar at the bottom. I can scroll and see all that point information and change it if I need to. I'll close that. This window is called the panorama. So if you look on the dark gray bar on the left or right, it says panorama. The panorama can actually have multiple tabs open. Right now we're in the point editor tab. If you want to close just a single tab from this window, the green check will close a single tab. If you want to close the entire window, the X will close the whole window. So I'll just close it. Okay. Let's see what else is back over in Toolspace. If I right click on points, it'll allow me to create a point. I can export a list of points. I can edit points. I can lock the points. So this will lock the XYZ values. I can unlock them. Don't lock them in class, but just know that that's an option there. If I have this category selected at the top, down here, I can select a specific point, right click on it, and it lets me, I mean, there's a bunch of things, edit, renumber, let's see what else. Select, zoom to, and pan to are useful. So let's try zoom to. So it zoomed me into that point that I selected in Toolspace. So it's a quick way to zoom into one of your points that you need to look at. else? Lock, unlock. Okay. All right, let's go into point groups. So at the top of tool space, there's point groups. Now there's a plus. If you click the plus, you'll notice that there are actually two groups here. The survey group that we created and the all points group. The all points group will automatically show up. Every single point in this drawing will be included in the all points group. Survey is more specific. I said these points are going to be in the survey group. But that being said, these points live in two groups. Let's right click on the survey group and let's go to properties. So there's a bunch of tabs at the top. We'll go through some of those later. On the information tab, we have the name of the group and we have some styles. So the survey group includes all of these points and it's telling these points to use the basic style and the point number elevation description label style. And if I zoom in, that's pretty much what they're using, right? That's what they're, minus the trees might be different, but that's what they are using. So when we talk about default style, the default styles come from the group. There's a point list tab. So you see all of these points are in that group and they are being assigned these styles. Okay, click OK or cancel. Now let's go to the all points group. Right click, go to properties. On the information tab, the name all points cannot be changed. This is just a default group that shows up, but it does have styles. So it's telling these points to use a basic point style, but no label style. And then you're like confused. You're like, okay, the points are in two groups. The two groups have different styles. Which style are these points going to use? So I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint now. CAD Masters offers online and classroom training for a variety of Autodesk software. For more information, go to www.cadmasters.com or give us a call at 925-939-1378. So let's talk about point groups and then we'll talk about point display. So point groups are covered on page 45 of the book. What is a point group? A collection of points often organized by survey date or description. Why do we use them? To categorize our points, to assign point styles, and to isolate points. Okay, so we'll get into all that. How do we create point groups? In the Prospector tab of Toolspace, we can right click on point groups and make a new point group. So we'll do that as well. Point display. So I created this list and I numbered them 4, 3, 2, 1 because number 1 is the highest priority, but I want to explain it from the bottom up. So I'm going to explain the lowest priority first, and then we'll work our way this way. Okay. So if I do not create a point group, all points will automatically show up. All of my points will live in that group, and that group will control the style, right? So if I don't do anything extra, this all points group will control the style. However, if I create my own custom point group, so we created a group called survey, that means order matters now, okay? So whichever group is at the top of the list will control the style. So let's test that theory. Right now, survey is at the top of the list. We can see the little X and we can see point number, elevation, and sometimes description. Let's right click on point groups, go to properties. In this list, we get to reorganize. So pick the all point group. There's some arrows on the right. I'll click the top arrow to move it all the way to the top. All points is now on top. Click OK. All points is now on top, and notice the labels disappeared, except for the trees. Ignore those for now. but the rest of them, all the labels disappeared. Okay, so whichever group is at the top of the list, that group controls the style. Let's go back to my slide. Okay, so if you have multiple groups, order matters. Now here, object level overrides. Object level overrides take a higher priority than the group style. What are object level overrides? AutoCAD properties window can be used to create an override. We saw that earlier. Description keys can also be used to create an override. So we see the trees have a description key. So let's take a look again. Even though all points is at the top, not all of the points look the same. The description keys are controlling the trees. And then let's do another override. Pick one of the X points, right click, open just regular properties. And then see the default means it's following the group. We can change the style. Let's do storm sewer manhole and point number elevation description. And you can hit escape. So this properties window can create an object level override. Description keys creates an object level override. Let's change it back. Select this point that we modified, and let's change the style back to default. Default's at the bottom. So both of them are on default now, which means they will follow the group style, the top group style. So let's say I want to make all of the points disappear. You might ask, why can't I just freeze them or turn them off? Yes, you can. But there are times where you don't want to get rid of all of them. You just want to get rid of some of them. We're going to create a group called hide points, and we'll use the group style to hide all of these points. When we use that group style, we're going to create a group override, and that group override will be able to override these object level overrides. I might be getting you confused, but anyways, so group comes first, object level override comes second, and then if you want the group to control all the points, you can do a group level override. So over in tool space, let's create a new group. Right click on point groups, make a new group. Okay, so the new point group, let's give it a name. On the information tab, call it hide points. And then down here, if the points are hidden, the style is set to none. So for both of these, I want the style set to none. If we go over to, there's a bunch of tabs that I'll go through later, but on the point list tab, notice there are no points in the group yet. So there's a bunch of ways to bring points into the group. Go back to information. We have the name, we have the styles, go to point groups. Let's include all points in this group. Okay, if I check mark all points, back on the point list tab, you should see all the points in that list. So you will see that most of the points disappeared. The hide points group is at the top. The hide points group has a style of none, but the trees did not go away. So back to my PowerPoint. I have a custom group. That group is at the top, but the description keys take a higher priority, right? So those trees have not disappeared. So to get those trees to disappear, I need a point group override. So let's go create the point group override. Right click on the group called hide points. Go to properties. There is a overrides tab. In the overrides tab, we want the style to be overridden, and we want the point label style to be overridden. So those two need a check mark. And then we want them overridden and set to none. So both of these are set to none. So that means every single point in this list will be overridden and set the styles to none. Click OK. How do I get my points back? I can either put all points at the top or survey at the top. So let's put survey at the top. Let's right click on point groups, go to properties, and move survey to the top. Save your work. All right, let's zoom in a little bit. I know it's hard to tell from here, but across the middle, there are points with a description ridge. And then right here, diagonal, there are points with a description top and toe. So I'm going to zoom into this little area here. You'll see that the points are overlapping. One thing you could try is making the scale smaller. So if I go to a 20 scale, they all shrink a little bit, but they're still overlapping. So another thing I can do is pull out the label with a leader. We'll start with this one. So when I click on it, it has two grips. Do not use the grip in the center of the X. That will move the point. You're going to be changing the XY coordinates. So use the grip above the X to pull out with a leader. So I'm going to do that for these top and toe points. Right. Let's see what else. If you want to reset those points when you select the label with the pull out, you can always right click and there should be a reset. Here's a reset label. Okay, but we'll leave them pulled out like that. What I want to do next is have us create additional point groups. There are times where you need to isolate just certain points. Like I want to isolate the top points. I want to isolate the toe points. Or if you look careful here, there are ridge points, right? So if I want to isolate those points, a good method is putting them into their own point group. So again, you might say, why can't I just use the layers? Right now, they are all on the same layer. They're on V node. The tree one, though, the tree one can be easily controlled by layers because that's V node tree. But these other ones are on a default layer V node, so you cannot control them separately unless you manually grab them and put them onto another layer, right? So there's a better way. You don't want to have to manually click on all these points. We're going to use the point groups to separate them. CAD Masters offers online and classroom training for a variety of Autodesk software. For more information, go to www.cadmasters.com or give us a call at 925-939-1378. Let me put in the chat what we're doing. Okay, so we're going to create new points groups, one for top, one for toe, and one for ridge. So I will walk you through creating a group for top. Then I'll give you guys some time to work on the other two groups on your own. So go up to tool space, right click on point groups, and go to new. Okay, so in this window, the information tab, we're going to call the group top. And then for the styles, basic, point number, elevation, description, those are fine. The second tab, point groups, is going to allow me to bring points into the group. I don't want all the points. I don't want hide points. I don't want survey. I just want the top points. So this tab is not helpful. Let's go to the next tab. Raw description matching. This is coming from the template. In the template, these are description keys. So remember, we have a description key that is controlling the trees. That's this one. any description that starts with a capital T, capital R, it doesn't matter what comes after, those are under this description key and they turn into tree symbols, right? But anyways, these are not going to help us for the description top. So skipping this tab. On the include tab, we have a lot more options. So let me just kind of walk you through the different options. We can include points with numbers matching. So let's say I want points 1 through 100, right? I can do that and it'll include all the points with those numbers. Maybe I don't have the point numbers memorized. I can use select in drawing. That way I can draw a window or I can select them individually. When I hit enter, it creates the point list for me. Okay, so that's another option. I'm not going to use that. Let me delete and uncheck. There's another option with elevations matching. So maybe I just want all positive numbers. So it might be elevations 100. All right. I say elevations that are greater than 0, right? So that'll be all positive numbers, positive elevations. Or you can do a point list as well. I mean, elevation list. Not using that one. There's with names matching. Our points don't actually have names. They only have descriptions. So this is not helpful. With raw descriptions matching, this is what I'm going to be using. Full description is from the description keys. So we'll skip that till later. But with raw description comes from that text file. So for us, the description is top. And if it's a longer description, you could put a star. So it's anything that starts with the word top, or you can say anything that ends with the word top by putting a star in the front, or anything that has the word top in the middle. You could do star on each side. In this case, top is all we need. Once you've put in something in this include tab, go over to the point list tab and check if it worked. So yes, it grabbed all 4 points. Let's say I don't want to include all of these. So let's look at these elevations. Let's say I only want points that are less, that have an elevation less than 145. Okay, there's an exclude tab. On the exclude tab, there's same options as the include tab. So I want with elevations that are less than 145. If I go back to the point list tab, notice, oh, what did I say here? Less than 145. So, oh, exclude, I said exclude the ones that are less than 145. So it's only keeping the ones that are greater than 145. I'll go back to exclude. I don't need that. I'll get rid of that. So point list looks good. 4 points in there. All right, click OK. And nothing really happens at this point. But let me show you how we can use this new top group and this hide group to isolate the top points. Go to point groups, right click, properties. I want the top group to be at the top, and I want the hide group to be the second group. How the points work are all the points need to have a style, right? So all the points, they go to the first group. If they are included in that group, they will take on that style. If they are not included in that group, they will go to the second group. If they are in the second group, they will take on that style. If not, they will go to the third group, right? So they start at the top and they keep searching, where am I? Where am I? And then once they find where they belong, they use that style of that group. Okay, so in this case, all the points will start at the top group. Top points will find a style. All the remaining points will go to the hide points group, and they will be basically set to no style, right? All right, click OK. And should have worked. Let me know if it did not work. I want you guys to create 2 additional groups, one for toe, one for ridge, and then chat done when you're finished. CAD Masters offers online and classroom training for a variety of Autodesk software. For more information, go to www.cadmasters.com or give us a call at 925-939-1378.